If you've not watched a lesson on codominant situations, please go back to that video because the information on this will be very relevant and it will be very confusing if it doesn't follow the video as opposed to trying to do this before that video. Today's lesson is going to be on blood typing, and some people have a background in blood typing. They think they know some of the rules, so we're going to go through some of it. It involves some situations that are Mendelian and not Mendelian, so we're going to try and tackle everything dealing with blood typing in this video. So we'll see if we can do that in 15 minutes. So there are 4 different blood types, and mind you, I'm not going to deal with the plus and minus or positive negative yet. I'm just going to focus on the letters. The 4 variations of blood groups that you have are A blood, B blood, AB, and O. So right away people recognize these. They start thinking about things they know already about who can give to whom, and unfortunately it's either a piece of memorization, or if you understand how you have these blood types, it might not be as much memorization but an understanding. So here you have 2 different situations happening. Notice that we have a situation where you have A and B both showing through. So that indicates that you're not dealing with a Mendelian inheritance. This is all caused by one gene, but that one gene has a few different scenarios happening at once. First off, there are actually 3 alleles. So that makes this a multiple allele situation. So when you're trying to do a Punnett square with blood typing, you have to understand multiple alleles as well. But also notice the notation. This is a standard notation. In the last video with codominance, I talked about how this base letter can kind of be up to you, but in blood types, I is always used. So it's really not even a key that you have to provide because it is a universal symbol. As long as you are using these, you should be good to go. Now, if you have AB blood, that would then be the individual that has inherited both the codominant A and B together at the same exact time. So they both show through, and momentarily I'll talk about what that actually means. But notice that there is no such thing as AO blood or BO blood. That means that there's something different with the O allele. The O allele is actually recessive, so that's why we indicate it with a lowercase I, to showcase that if you ever pair it with this allele, then the dominant allele will show through. So the only way that you can actually phenotypically express O blood is if you pair it with itself, the other recessive allele. So AB has only one relative genotype to match with it. O blood has only one. These 2 have 2 different variations because you either can be homozygous, meaning you have 2 of the same alleles, the A allele, or you can be heterozygous. So this is the situation where you pair a dominant variation of the A allele with the recessive allele for the O. So therefore you would still showcase the same A blood if you inherit either one of these. B is the same thing. You can be the homozygous B, or you can be heterozygous B. So if you're dealing with a Punnett square where A or B is involved, they have to give you more information. They have to either tell you homozygous or heterozygous, or most often what they often do is they tell you that one of their parents had O blood, because that indicates if someone above you has O blood, that means their genotype is i. So in the genetics of passing it down, they would only be able to pass down the O allele to you, so that would guarantee this person will be heterozygous. That happens 9 times out of 10. So this is multiple alleles. You see that with the 3. That doesn't mean you inherit more than 2 alleles. Instead, that just means you have more options. So there's a lot more blood types because of that scenario. Mendelian genetics, remember, had only 2 variations. It was like you had dimples or no dimples. Incomplete and codominance had 3 variations because they were still only a 2 allele situation, but it was that heterozygous that created a 3rd option. So multiple alleles can have more than 2. In this case, there are 3. I'll show you an example that we do in class where there's 4. So multiple alleles doesn't have a standard value, but for this case, you have this scenario. So you can do something such as crossing a heterozygous B person, crossing it with a person who's heterozygous A, not going through a whole word problem. But if that's the cross, phenotypically B blood, phenotypically A blood, I will tell you 9 times out of 10 probably if you ask a person out on general population, if you have a parent with A blood and a parent with B blood, what type of child will they produce? Most often they'll say AB just because that's how they think that works. But this Punnett square will easily prove them incorrect, unfortunately. So if that's the setup, look at, you have one square that's AB. Sorry. You have one square that is phenotypically A. You have one square phenotypically B. And then you have one square phenotypically O. So there is every option if this were the case. And people don't necessarily know if you're phenotypically a certain blood type. They don't automatically know their genotype unless they do a little family digging. But that's how you would do a simple blood type. Now, the other thing that people question is, okay, well, what determines if you have these blood types? So a quick way to teach this is I'll create 4 quadrants. Each quadrant, I'm going to showcase one red blood cell. And inside of the red blood cell, I'll indicate what quadrant I'll be representing. So we'll just do it in the order AB, AB, and O. Now, the 2 words you need to recognize to understand blood typing is what are antigens and what are antibodies. So they are both proteins. That means they're made up of amino acids, a little review. But an antigen is a protein marker. There's a lot of context of antigens, but we'll talk about them in the context of blood typing right now. And an antibody is going to be kind of a protein that deals with immune response. And the way they interact is kind of tells you who can donate to who and why. So an antigen is something that attaches to the outside of the red blood cell. You have to have a certain gene to produce that protein. So we do this very simply. I'm going to indicate the antigen A by just doing a kind of a generic shape. We'll do a little triangle. So that means that you have that little triangle right there is an antigen. It's a protein, and we'll call that the A antigen. And you go over here and you would do something very similar. The B antigen is a different shaped protein because it would be a different sequence of amino acids. So let's do little half circles. All right, so that's the B antigen here. What makes this codominant situation is the fact that you have both being produced. One of your homologous chromosomes will code for the A antigen, so they want to show themselves. Make them a little more. So I'll put some triangles there. And then you have another on the other homologous chromosome coding for this gene. So that means that protein wants to be made as well. So sorry, some of these look a little blended, but so triangle, half circle. So an AB individual has both in some type of repetition, but that would represent the A and the B antigen. Someone that has an O blood type means that they do not produce either the A or the B. So it is the absence. There is no antigens around the red blood cell at all. The second thing that you need to know is your antibodies. Now, antibodies are an immune response, so what they're going to do is they're going to protect your body from foreign antigens. So what would you want to have as an army? And I'll kind of refer to it as a little army. That's like your immune response. If I have an A antigen, I don't want to have an army that fights against the A antigen. That would not be good. That's like fighting yourself. So what would happen is your body would have the capability of producing an army that is built to protect against the foreign antigen. So I'm going to try and make them the shape of the, and I'll talk about this little portion momentarily. So these are antibodies, and they are around the red blood cells hunting for foreign antigens that are attached to other blood cells. So if this red blood cell tried to make its way over to someone that has this scenario, these antibodies are going to latch on to the antigens. So that's why you can't have a donation of someone from B blood over to A blood, because their body will reject it by fighting the foreign antigens. And on the flip side, you're going to do the same exact thing here. If you logically have B blood, you would like to fight the foreign A antigen. So they're going to have those antibodies around their red blood cell. So think about, what would you want? If you have the A antigen and the B antigen, do you want an army of anything? The answer would be no. So technically right now we're not going to draw anything because they would not have the need, because they wouldn't recognize anything as foreign. All they know is A's and B's. And if you have a cell that has both of them, neither of them will look foreign to you, so there are no antibodies that surround. But if you are an O blood person, that means you don't have either the A nor the B, So that would say that they would find them as being foreign. So you're going to have antibodies that are going to match both. So that's a little rendition. Now, what does that do? I don't think many people confuse the ability that A blood can't go to B and B go to A. It's this scenario down here. So think about it in terms of the more you have as an army, does that mean you have the ability to accept things into your country if you're doing thinking like that? Or would you allow more things to come in? And my hope is you would recognize having more of an army says that nothing can come in here. And the reason because everything will look foreign to it, so these things will fight it. So going from this quadrant over to here is bad news for the O blood. Going from B to O, bad news. A to O, bad news. But many people indicate that O blood, they automatically know that, or they recognize that O is often known as the universal donor. Now think about why that is. If you don't have anything on your red blood cell, no quadrant is going to recognize you as being foreign. When you donate blood, you don't donate everything. You're not giving your army to them as well, or your immune system. You're giving just the red blood cell. So if I take this corner and say, I'm going to take this blood cell and put it into this quadrant, it's going to be able to sneak right in because there's nothing on the outside that would represent itself as being foreign. So that's why it can donate into this quadrant. You can take O blood and donate into A because the A army or A antibodies, or the antibodies of someone that has A blood will not recognize this blood cell as being foreign. But if you look at the person that has AB blood, there is no army whatsoever. There's no antibodies. So O definitely can get over here if there's no army at all. But with AB can't go into any of these quadrants because you would then see it as being foreign. They're going to recognize a portion of this blood as being foreign because they have that B antibody. They will attach to that B portion of the red blood cell. The A antibodies that the B blood person possesses will latch on to the A antigens over here. So that's not good either. And then definitely this quadrant has both fighters. So this thing is definitely not getting over. So the AB person kind of has to stay here. That would mean that the AB can't donate to anybody. But on the flip side, since there is no immune system surrounding, there's no proteins around it, it's going to allow everything in. So that's why AB is the universal recipient. Okay? So that gives you a little background. I know that you might try and just memorize it, but if you think about it in terms of antigens and antibodies, you can work through the problem by understanding why this quadrant is the universal donor. As a review, there is no antigens on it, so it can go anywhere. That means it can donate to any quadrant. But if you're AB, you can now only receive from everybody. Can't go anywhere. It can receive. But if you're O, you can't receive from anybody. The only person you can receive for is the other O-blooded individuals. Okay? So that kind of goes through it. Hopefully it made sense, but you can feel free to ask me any questions when we get back to class.